Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how to prepare the rising dovetail. The tools I'm going to be using are a dovetail saw, a marking gauge, steel rule, a bevel gauge, a engineer's tri-square, a pencil and chisel or chisels. I'm going to be connecting these two components so that this acts almost like a leg going into this component, coming right through to the top, with a dovetail on the front here and also on the top. Both components have been prepared square and true all round. I want to make sure the finished joint has got a shoulder all the way round the three corners underneath the work. So I've set my marking gauge and I'm just going to mark that on the end of the tail piece. I also want to mark the shoulder down the back of the work for the depth of the top that I'm connecting into. Now I reset my gauge from the front of the work to the shoulder line at the back. And I mark that on the underside of what's going to be the top piece. Next, I position the joint where I'd like it, and I need to transfer the shoulder lines back onto the top. I'm also going to mark the depth of the top on the tail piece. You have two choices at this stage. If you're going to be connecting a piece together with various other parts, other legs, and maybe there's a difference in angles, then you may want to set a specific angle to mark up the side here for your joinery. Alternatively, you may wish to decide how wide the tail is that shows through on the top. Whichever method you decide to use, you now need to mark from the intersection of the shoulder up the side of the tail piece, and then we square that line across the top. Like so. And you'll see this part of the wood coming out as a dovetail on the top of the work. I'm choosing to split the amount of material on the top here and show this much of the dovetail at the top. So I'll mark from this corner down to that intersection. Now I can reset my gauge to that size, and score the line in, and also score a line on the top between the two extremes of where the dovetail is going to show through. And I'll pencil that in so you can see it. Then we take a bevel gauge and I like to set for about 3 in 1 or 2.5 in 1, something like that. So 1 inch across the steel rule and 3 inches from where it emerges from the gauge, and the bevel, outside of the bevel, should touch the corner of the steel rule. So that's set a 3 in 1. Now I'd normally do this on a scrap piece of wood, but I can set the bevel on the end here, mark that line or mark that angle, then reset the bevel from the front face to the same line, and I can mark the ends of the dovetail on the top. We're marking from the intersection of how deep the tail is going to go in and its extreme width. And so at the top, this is the area that we need to remove. Now I use the tri-square to transfer the extremes for the dovetail. These lines we put in here. Transfer those down the front of the wood and round onto the back side. Then it's from where those lines intersect with the previous depth line that we gauged, which, if you'll remember, is the width of the leg minus the shoulder line. It's from these two corners that we use the bevel gauge at the same setting to mark the dovetail on the bottom. So from this corner out to the front, and from this corner out to the front. Then back on the front of the work, we join up the dovetail we've marked on the top to the dovetail on the bottom, from the corners here and here. And I'm sure there's mathematically some equation to work out exactly what that angle is, but we don't need to know it. We just use the rule to connect the points together. So there's a dovetail on top, the dovetail on the front, and dovetail underneath. As you can see, we're going deeper underneath than we are on top, so there'll be a slope to the back of the socket. On the tailpiece, we can extend the rear shoulder line round the sides to the front, and just notch the front a bit. And scribe cheek cuts from the gauge mark at the top down to those lines on the front. Now we can mark the tail by using the bevel gauge again to mark from the two corners at the top out to the front. Now we can set the bevel gauge to the dovetail lines on the front of the top, and we mark the front dovetail using that angle. Extend the shoulders across to meet the base of the dovetail, and then we're ready to saw that, tracking the saw down the front dovetail line and the top dovetail line. We can go ahead and saw the socket now, but when I saw, I like to put knife lines in first, so I'll just do that very quickly. And we want to track the front dovetail line and the back dovetail line. Making sure we don't go too far on the top of the work. And to make it a bit easier to get the waste material out, I'll just put a saw cut through the middle as well. You can go ahead and chisel it out, but actually if you've got a coping saw, that can make life a little bit easier. When we've reached the lines at the back of the dovetail, we then need to prepare a flat slope. You see at the moment I've got a bump in the middle. Just create it flat by paring away the material in between the two edges. And that's the socket completed. When you cut the tails, just remember, stay on the waist side again of the line. We can always pare it down for a tight fit. What we can't do is add any more material afterwards. So just pay attention to the dovetail line on the top and on the front side, and track that with your saw. Once you've cut the slope sides, then it's time to cut either the shoulders in or the sloped back. And I'll do the sloped back first. Tracking the line of the back of the dovetail and the slope on the side of the work. And then the sides. Be careful not to go any deeper than the dovetail saw cuts. Now that should be quite tight because I've left the lines. I can see it is. So we'll just tidy that up with chisels. Now after about 10 minutes fettling, that's about as tight as we want to push it by hand. That's a good fit. Dovetail on the front, dovetail on the top. I'm just going to apply some glue to it, glue it up, and then flush off all the surfaces with a plane. The rising dovetail. Give it a go.